For centuries, religious tradition held that Jesus descended directly from the lineage of David, a prophetic fulfillment that shaped dogma and influenced biblical interpretations throughout the Christian world. However, as we delve into the revolutionary spiritual revelations of Edgar Cayce, we encounter a vision that stunningly deconstructs this absolute certainty. He categorically asserts that Christ's true mission could not be limited to an earthly genealogy, revealing much deeper, more spiritual connections. What emerges from this discovery is a Jesus who breaks all human barriers, connected to a cosmic lineage that transcends any historical record. Prepare yourself, because what you are about to discover may completely shake everything you believed until now about the Savior's origin. The Bible presents detailed genealogies that attempt to link Jesus directly to David, with the apparent goal of reinforcing the fulfillment of ancient messianic prophecies that the Jewish people eagerly awaited. These genealogical lists were carefully constructed by the evangelists to bridge prophetic expectations with the historical reality of Jesus Christ. The purpose was clear: to validate Jesus' messiahship in a society that demanded proof of royal lineage, to accept any claimant to the Davidic throne. For generations, this narrative became one of the fundamental pillars of the Christian faith, repeated in sermons, Bible studies, and theological doctrines around the world. The Davidic genealogy became a kind of divine birth certificate, a sacred document that supposedly proved Jesus' messianic legitimacy. But when we analyze these genealogies with a critical and investigative eye, we discover something absolutely surprising. The lists presented by Matthew and Luke do not agree, creating glaring contradictions that defy any traditional explanation. The names differ drastically, the generations do not coincide, and the genealogical paths follow completely different routes, as if they were referring to different people. This discrepancy cannot be simply ignored or explained away as a copyist's error, as it represents a fundamental flaw in the traditional theological foundation. Edgar Cayce suggests that these records were shaped far more by human interests than by divine revelation, representing a desperate attempt to fit Jesus into a pre-established expectation. The truth is that these contradictions are clear clues that something much deeper and more mysterious was happening with the origin of Jesus Christ. Cayce's analysis reveals that these genealogies function primarily as a tool of social and religious validation, reinforcing a symbolic inheritance rather than a literal line of descent. The primary objective was to convince the Jewish people, deeply rooted in genealogical traditions, to accept Jesus as the Messiah promised by the ancient prophets. This need for earthly proof reflects the limitations of human understanding more than the spiritual reality of Christ's mission in the world. The scribes and evangelists were attempting to translate a cosmic reality into genealogical language that the people could easily understand and accept. However, this translation ultimately created a conceptual prison that limited the true dimension of Jesus Christ's divine nature. The fundamental question Cayce raises is deeply provocative and challenging. Did the true Messiah, the cosmic Christ, really need an earthly bloodline to fulfill his universal divine mission? This question strikes directly at the heart of the Christian tradition, questioning whether genealogical validation is not a human attempt to domesticate the divine. If Jesus truly was the Son of God, shouldn't his authority derive from his direct connection to the Creator, independent of any earthly heritage? The need to prove Davidic descent could actually diminish the grandeur and universality of the Christic mission, limiting it to tribal and nationalistic concerns. Cayce suggests that this insistence on the Davidic lineage represents more of a concession to human limitations than a revelation of spiritual truth. Before we continue, we want to feel your energy. Leave us a comment, your name, and where you're watching from. It could be your city, state, or country. So, let's map this great current of light and show how our message is uniting hearts everywhere. Write in the comments now and let's expand this vibration of faith and hope together. The impact of this revelation is absolutely transformative for our understanding of Jesus Christ and his mission on earth, forcing us to completely reconsider the traditional foundations of the Christian faith. If the Davidic lineage was truly a human construct, it means that Jesus' true authority came from a much higher and more universal source. This perspective frees Jesus from earthly genealogical constraints, allowing his message to transcend racial, national, and cultural barriers even more powerfully. Cayce's revelation invites us to see Jesus not as the heir to a limited earthly throne, but as the bearer of a universal divine consciousness. This paradigm shift can completely revolutionize our relationship with Christ, making it more intimate, direct, and spiritually authentic. According to Edgar Cayce's extraordinary revelations, Jesus did not come into the world to prove a limited earthly origin, but to manifest a cosmic purpose that completely transcends any human genealogical consideration. His true identity was not rooted in the blood of mortal kings, but in a direct and permanent connection with the very creator spirit of the universe. This revolutionary perspective suggests that Jesus possessed a unique spiritual DNA, a divine coding that cannot be measured by traditional biological standards. His essence was composed of pure light, unconditional love, and infinite wisdom, elements that cannot be inherited through earthly bloodlines. What inhabited Jesus's physical body was a cosmic consciousness that deliberately chose to manifest itself in human form to fulfill a specific mission. This means that Jesus' true origin monumentally surpasses any known physical genealogy, connecting directly to the highest dimensions of divine creation. Cayce reveals that Jesus was the incarnation of a Christ consciousness that had already manifested in other times and cultures throughout human history. This Christ consciousness was not born with Jesus, but has always existed as a universal force of love, wisdom, and spiritual transformation. In different eras, this same divine energy manifested itself through other great masters and avatars, but in the figure of Jesus, it assumed its maximum and most complete expression. The earth had been prepared for millennia to receive this special manifestation of divine consciousness in its purest and most accessible form. Jesus Christ's nature represents a spiritual evolution that completely transcends the limitations of biological heredity, functioning at levels of reality that material science cannot yet comprehend. His physical body was merely a temporary vehicle for a consciousness that existed long before his conception and continued to exist after his ascension. This divine consciousness chose Jesus as its perfect instrument, creating a unique fusion between humanity and divinity that served as a bridge for all humanity. Jesus' spiritual DNA contained codes of light that could awaken the same Christ consciousness latent in every human being. His mission was to demonstrate that we all carry this same divine seed, just waiting for the right conditions to blossom on our own spiritual journey. Thus, the focus of spiritual investigation should not be on determining where Jesus came from biologically, but on deeply understanding what he represented spiritually for all humanity and for the evolutionary future of the planet. His royal genealogy was cosmic, directly connected to the angelic hierarchies and divine councils that govern the spiritual evolution of the universe. Jesus came as a direct ambassador of the kingdom of heaven, carrying credentials that could not be printed on parchment or registered in earthly notary offices. His authority emanated from the creative source itself, validated not by human documents, but by the real transformation he produced in the souls he touched. Recognition of his true nature did not depend on genealogies, but on each person's spiritual capacity to perceive the divine light radiating from their being. This understanding completely revolutionizes our perception of Jesus Christ, elevating him far beyond the limitations of any earthly lineage to the position he truly deserves as a direct manifestation of divinity. When we understand that his spiritual DNA was composed of pure divine essence, we cease seeking validation in historical records and begin seeking confirmation in our own direct spiritual experience. Jesus then becomes not just a historical figure, but a living, present force that continues to operate through the Christ consciousness in all true seekers. His royal lineage is us, all those who awaken to the same consciousness of love and service he demonstrated during his time on earth. The spiritual DNA he carried continues to replicate itself through the hearts and minds that open to receive his transformative light. The people of Israel lived in feverish and desperate anticipation, eagerly awaiting a political and military king, a direct descendant of David, who would finally liberate the nation from the brutal Roman oppression that suffocated their culture and religion. This messianic expectation had crystallized over centuries of suffering, creating a very specific image of the promised Savior, a charismatic leader, a valiant warrior, a brilliant strategist, and a legitimate descendant of the Davidic royal line. Ancient prophecies were interpreted through the lens of national despair, shaping a limited vision of the Messiah as an exclusively political and nationalistic liberator. This perspective created tremendous historical pressure on anyone who dared present themselves as the promised Messiah of the Jews. Society had created rigid and specific criteria that any messianic candidate would need to meet to be considered authentic and legitimate. This limited earthly expectation created a cultural filter that prevented most people from recognizing the true spiritual and universal nature of the Christ-like mission Jesus brought to the world. The crowd sought signs of political power, displays of military might, and promises of national liberation. But Jesus offered something infinitely more valuable and transformative: spiritual freedom, inner transformation, and union with the divine. The mindset of the time was so focused on external and temporary solutions that it completely missed the opportunity to receive the eternal gift Jesus was freely offering. This collective blindness was not malice, but the result of centuries of cultural and religious conditioning that had narrowed the people's spiritual vision. The historical irony is that the true Messiah was right before them, but his greatness was so beyond human expectations that it went unnoticed by most. Edgar Cayce reveals an absolutely stunning truth. Jesus deliberately and consciously broke with this limited and nationalistic messianic idea, demonstrating through his words and actions that his reign was neither political nor territorial, but completely spiritual and universal. Every teaching, every parable, every miracle Jesus performed was designed to expand human consciousness beyond tribal and national limitations. When he declared that "My kingdom is not of this world," Jesus was making a revolutionary statement that completely dismantled the traditional messianic expectations of his people. He was announcing that he had come to establish an inner kingdom, a state of divine consciousness accessible to anyone regardless of nationality, social class, or religious background. This statement was so radical that even his closest disciples struggled to fully grasp its transformative implications. By consciously denying this earthly connection to political and military power structures, Jesus boldly challenged the entire traditional messianic vision that had been cultivated by generations of religious and political leaders. His refusal to become an earthly king confused and disappointed many followers who expected an immediate political revolution against Roman rule. However, Jesus was operating on a much deeper and more lasting level, planting seeds of spiritual transformation that would continue to germinate long after all the political empires of the time had completely disappeared from history. His rebellion was against the limitations of human consciousness, against selfishness, against separation, and against everything that prevents human beings from realizing their true divine nature. The kingdom Jesus came to establish was infinitely more powerful and lasting than any political kingdom because it operated at the level of the soul and eternal consciousness. Before we continue, if you're enjoying our content and can support our work and be part of our exclusive community, become a channel member. Besides helping us continue bringing you incredible content, you'll have access to special benefits. Click the button, become a member, and join us. It is precisely at this crucial point that Jesus completely distances himself from the messianic narrative that official religion had preserved and propagated for centuries, revealing a cosmic mission that transcended all imaginable human limitations. His mission was truly universal, not restricted to a specific lineage, a chosen people, or a particular era in history. Jesus came as a gift from the Creator to all humanity, offering a path home that any sincere soul could follow, regardless of their earthly origins. This universality of his mission explains why Christianity spread far beyond the borders of Israel, touching hearts and transforming lives in every culture and civilization it encountered along the way. Jesus' true lineage was not in genealogical scrolls, but in the universal spiritual lineage that connects all sincere seekers of divine truth throughout the ages. One of the most intriguing and revealing questions in the traditional narrative about Jesus is the curiously secondary and nearly invisible role of Joseph, his supposed earthly father, a figure who should have been central if the Davidic lineage were truly fundamental to Jesus' messiahship. If genealogy and bloodlines were such essential elements in validating messianic authority, why does Joseph practically disappear from the gospel narrative after the first few chapters? Why do the Gospels devote so much space to the genealogies that pass through Joseph, but then relegate him to such an insignificant role in Jesus' life and ministry? This glaring contradiction reveals that something much deeper was going on than the official religious tradition wants to admit. Joseph's absence from the central narrative suggests that the evangelists themselves intuited that Jesus' true paternity could not be reduced to questions of traditional biological heredity. Edgar Cayce offers an absolutely revolutionary explanation for this mystery. Spiritual tradition has always placed Joseph in the background because it intuitively recognizes that Jesus' true fatherhood could not be limited or defined by ordinary human blood. Joseph served as an earthly guardian, a protector providentially appointed to care for the Holy Family during Jesus' formative years on earth. His role was crucial but temporary, functioning as a bridge between the earthly and heavenly dimensions that allowed the Christic mission to unfold within a normal human family structure. Jesus' true fatherhood was directly divine, a unique relationship between the Creator and his most perfect expression in human form. Joseph spiritually understood his special role and fulfilled it with humility, knowing he was serving a purpose far greater than his human understanding could fully encompass. Mary, in turn, fulfilled the sacred and indispensable role of bringing to earth a physical body perfectly prepared to receive and manifest the Christ consciousness in all its purity and power. Her body was specially purified and prepared through many previous incarnations to serve as a living temple for the highest divine manifestation the earth had ever received. The conception of Jesus was a cosmic event involving spiritual forces and technologies that completely transcend our current understanding of biology and human reproduction. Mary was chosen not only for her spiritual purity, but for her unique ability to maintain the vibration necessary to sustain a divine consciousness in human form. Her role was infinitely more complex and sacred than simply providing genetic material, involving conscious cooperation with angelic hierarchies in a process of divine manifestation. However, the spirit inhabiting Jesus' physical body was not subject to the normal laws of biological heredity, operating according to spiritual principles that completely transcend material genetics. Cayce reveals that the soul that became Jesus had consciously chosen the circumstances of his birth, including the specific family that would best serve the purposes of his earthly mission. This choice was not based on bloodlines but on spiritual factors such as vibratory purity, spiritual dedication, and the ability to support a divine mission of cosmic proportions. Jesus' body was a specially prepared vehicle, but his true identity completely transcended any physical or genetic limitations. The Christ consciousness inhabiting this body existed long before his conception and would continue to exist long after his ascension, proving that his essence was eternally independent of any earthly inheritance. Therefore, insisting on Joseph's genealogical lineage represents a fundamental error of interpretation, a misguided human attempt to fit the divine into limited genealogical schemes that simply do not apply to manifestations of cosmic consciousness. This insistence reveals more about our conceptual limitations than about the reality of the Christ nature of Jesus Christ. When we attempt to validate Jesus through earthly genealogies, we are inadvertently diminishing his greatness and universality, attempting to domesticate a cosmic force within inadequate human frameworks. The true validation of Jesus comes not from genealogical records, but from the real transformation that his presence and teachings continue to produce in the lives of millions of people around the world. The silence about Joseph in the central narratives of the Gospels is, in fact, a profound revelation about the truly divine and transcendent nature of the Christ mission on earth. Edgar Cayce reveals an absolutely fascinating and transformative truth. Jesus already existed as a spiritual entity of extraordinary evolution, long before any physical manifestation on earth, operating in the higher dimensions as part of the divine hierarchies responsible for the spiritual evolution of all humanity. This pre-existence was not simply a passive existence, but an active participation in the cosmic councils that plan and coordinate the great evolutionary movements that guide the development of consciousness throughout the universe. The soul that would become Jesus had already reached levels of purity and wisdom that qualified it for special missions of divine service in multiple dimensions of creation. Its spiritual evolution had progressed through countless experiences of loving service, preparing it to assume the cosmic responsibility of serving as a bridge between humanity and divinity. This preparation included incarnations on other planets and dimensions, always serving as a channel of light and transformation wherever its presence was needed. Jesus' earthly mission was meticulously planned and prepared, long before any human record or earthly genealogy, involving not only the angelic hierarchies, but also the conscious cooperation of highly evolved souls who volunteered to support this extraordinary cosmic event. This divine planning included the careful selection of the time, place, family, and circumstances that would best serve the purposes of the Christ mission on planet Earth. Every detail was considered and adjusted to maximize the transformative impact that the Christ presence could have on the collective human consciousness. The choice of Palestine as his birthplace was not accidental, but strategic, representing a convergence point between different spiritual traditions and cultures that would allow the Christ message to spread rapidly throughout the known world. The timing was also perfect, coinciding with a moment in human history when humanity was ready to receive more advanced teachings about its true divine nature. This cosmic origin and divine planning completely eliminate any need for earthly lineages, revealing that Jesus' authority and authenticity derived from sources far higher and more universal than any human genealogy could provide. The lineage that truly mattered was the soul lineage, a direct and unbroken connection to the very creator source of the universe. Jesus did not need to prove Davidic descent because his true descent was directly divine, validated not by earthly scrolls but by his ability to manifest unconditional love, infinite wisdom, and transformative power. His authority emanated from the very essence of his being, naturally radiating a presence that touched and awakened the latent divine in all who approached with an open heart. Jesus' cosmic genealogy included an unbroken lineage of loving service that stretched through eons of conscious spiritual evolution. But here a question arises that can completely change your perspective on Jesus. If he already existed as a divine being before the earth was even formed, why would he choose to go through a human incarnation with all its limitations and suffering? This extraordinary vision completely shifts Jesus from a historical figure limited by the geography and culture of Israel to a cosmic being who magnificently transcends linear time and space, operating simultaneously in multiple dimensions of reality. The Christ was not born in Bethlehem as a result of genealogical circumstances, but as part of a meticulously crafted cosmic plan that involved all of humanity and the evolutionary future of planet Earth. His incarnation represented a unique moment in cosmic history, when the higher dimensions of creation approached Earth through a direct manifestation of divine consciousness. This event was not only important for humanity, but had repercussions throughout the universe, serving as an example and inspiration for other civilizations also undergoing similar evolutionary processes. Jesus' mission established new standards of possibility for the evolution of consciousness in physical form, demonstrating that it is possible to maintain divine connection even within the limitations of earthly experience. Recognizing this cosmic dimension of the Christ mission completely frees us from genealogical limitations and connects us directly with the true greatness and universality of the eternal Christ. When we understand that Jesus came from higher dimensions through conscious choice and unconditional love for humanity, our gratitude and reverence deepen exponentially, elevating our relationship with him to entirely new levels of spiritual intimacy. This perspective transforms Jesus from a distant historical figure to a living, accessible presence that continues to operate through the Christ consciousness in all sincere seekers of truth. The pre-earth plan continues to unfold through each soul that awakens to its true divine nature, making each of us a conscious extension of the original Christ mission. The royal lineage of Jesus is all of us when we consciously choose to collaborate with the divine plan of raising planetary consciousness through love and selfless service. The glaring and irreconcilable discrepancies between the Gospels regarding Jesus' genealogy do not simply represent clerical errors or copyists' mistakes, as many theologians desperately try to explain, but constitute deliberate and revealing clues that something much deeper and more mysterious was being carefully hidden from the eyes of the common people. These contradictions function as secret codes, signs left by the evangelists themselves to indicate that the real truth about Jesus' origins completely transcended any attempt at traditional genealogical documentation. The differences between Matthew's and Luke's lists are so dramatic that they simply cannot be explained away as minor memory errors or textual translation issues. Each evangelist was working with different information because each had access to different aspects of a much larger and more complex truth than could be contained in conventional genealogical records. These contradictions are, in fact, intentional clues left so that future generations of spiritual seekers could discover deeper layers of understanding about the true nature of Jesus Christ. Edgar Cayce offers a revolutionary explanation for these apparent contradictions. The Gospel writers faced an impossible dilemma, desperately trying to unite the limited prophetic expectations of the Jewish people with the transcendent spiritual reality of Jesus, but the inevitable result was a contradictory narrative that reveals more than it conceals. The evangelists intuitively knew that Jesus did not fit into traditional genealogical categories, but they also understood that they needed to provide some kind of validation that the people could accept and understand within their cultural limitations. This tension between spiritual truth and social necessity created narratives that function on multiple levels simultaneously, superficially satisfying genealogical expectations, but profoundly revealing that something much greater was happening. The evangelists were encoding a cosmic truth within earthly narrative structures, knowing that only those with prepared spiritual eyes could discern the deeper layers of meaning hidden in the apparent contradictions. This genealogical confusion, far from diminishing Jesus' mission, actually magnifies its cosmic importance and reveals that the true Christ could not be fitted or limited within any traditional earthly framework, no matter how sacred or respected that framework might be. The contradictions serve as a powerful declaration that Jesus' nature completely transcended all known human categories, forcing the creation of new forms of spiritual understanding. Every attempt to fit Jesus into conventional genealogical molds failed because his true essence was too great, too pure, and too universal to fit within earthly limitations. The evangelists were attempting to describe the indescribable, document the transcendent, and explain the ineffable using conceptual tools inadequate to the task. The result was narratives that consistently point beyond themselves, directing the attention of discerning readers to dimensions of reality that completely transcend linear history and traditional biological genealogy. Jesus' true lineage cannot be proven through lists of names on ancient scrolls, but only through his transformative life, his revolutionary teachings, and the profound and lasting impact he left on the spiritual history of all humanity. His true genealogy is written in the hearts he touched, the lives he transformed, and the collective consciousness of humanity he permanently raised to new heights of spiritual possibility. Each person who awakens to Christ consciousness becomes part of Jesus' true lineage, a spiritual lineage that continues to grow and expand through the centuries. The miracles he performed, the words of wisdom he spoke, and the unconditional love he demonstrated constitute his true spiritual DNA, far more real and powerful than any material genetic code. This living, dynamic lineage cannot be challenged by critics or destroyed by persecution, because it exists at the level of the soul and eternal consciousness, where only truth and love have real power. The genealogical contradictions in the Gospels, therefore, serve as a divine invitation to transcend the limitations of linear thinking and open ourselves to deeper dimensions of spiritual truth that cannot be captured in conventional historical documents. When we stop trying to resolve these contradictions through traditional academic methods and begin to see them as portals to higher understandings, we discover that they lead us directly to the heart of the Christ mystery. Genealogical discrepancies then become not problems to be solved, but sacred mysteries to be contemplated and experienced through the expansion of spiritual consciousness. Each apparent contradiction invites us to let go of our conceptual limitations and open ourselves to the possibility that Jesus represents something far greater and more wondrous than our linear minds can fully comprehend. The real truth about Jesus is not hidden in genealogies, but revealed in the ongoing transformation that his presence provokes in all hearts, sincerely open to receive his divine light. For Edgar Cayce, the true lineage of Jesus is magnificently universal, completely transcending all racial, cultural, national, and temporal barriers that divide humanity into artificial and limiting categories. He represents the eternal divine seed that potentially dwells in every human soul, regardless of their ethnic origin, cultural background, or social circumstances of birth. This Christ seed is not the exclusive property of any specific people, religion, or tradition, but constitutes the common spiritual heritage of all humanity as sons and daughters, from the same universal Father-Mother Creator. It's not a matter of inheritance based on blue blood or earthly aristocratic lineage, but of a divine cosmic energy that all human beings can access, develop, and manifest through their conscious journey of spiritual awakening. Jesus came to demonstrate this universal possibility, serving as the perfect example of the latent divine potential that exists within every sincere and dedicated human heart. When Jesus repeatedly declared, "My kingdom is not of this world," he was revealing precisely this universal dimension of his mission. Its transcendent origin was not from the limited earth, but from the infinite eternity where all souls truly belong, as unique expressions of divine consciousness. This revolutionary declaration completely dismantled all nationalistic and tribal expectations of his time, heralding a message of cosmic unity that potentially included all sentient beings in the universe. His spiritual realm had no geographical boundaries, required no genealogical passports, and made no distinctions based on blood descent or traditional cultural affiliation. Citizenship in this divine realm was determined solely by purity of intention, sincerity of spiritual seeking, and the capacity to love unconditionally all living beings. Jesus was heralding a new era of consciousness, where each person's true identity would be recognized as fundamentally divine and eternally connected to the universal source of all life. Historically, the reference to David's lineage functioned only as a temporary and strategic narrative device, a necessary pedagogical concession for the genealogically minded Jewish people to initially accept and consider the transformative presence of Jesus in their lives. This communication strategy respected the cultural limitations of the time without compromising the universal truth of the Christ mention, which completely transcended all such earthly categories. Cayce reveals that Jesus consciously allowed this genealogical interpretation to circulate because he knew it would serve as an initial bridge of acceptance, but his real intention was to gradually expand people's understanding to much vaster and more inclusive dimensions of spiritual identity. Once hearts opened to receive his transformative light, genealogical limitations would naturally dissolve before the direct experience of the cosmic unity he continually demonstrated. This respectful yet progressive pedagogical approach allowed his universal message to take root culturally, without being permanently limited by them. However, Jesus' true spiritual family was not recorded in ancient genealogical scrolls, but alive and pulsating in all those who consciously choose to follow the path of light, unconditional love, and selfless service that he perfectly exemplified during his earthly incarnation. This spiritual family includes people from all eras, cultures, religions, and backgrounds, united not by blood or material DNA, but by the conscious choice to develop the same divine qualities that Jesus manifested: genuine compassion, practical wisdom, spiritual courage, unconditional forgiveness, and total dedication to the well-being of all living beings. Each person who awakens to these Christ-like qualities automatically becomes part of Jesus' true lineage, a lineage that continually grows through conscious spiritual awakening. This cosmic family is not limited even by physical death, including all souls who, in any dimension of existence, consciously choose to collaborate with the divine plan of elevating universal consciousness through active love and selfless service. The universal lineage of Jesus, therefore, represents a complete revolution in our understanding of identity, belonging, and spiritual purpose, freeing us from all the tribal and nationalistic limitations that artificially separate the children of the same divine cosmic family. When we recognize that our true lineage is spiritual and not genetic, we discover an extraordinary freedom to express our divine nature without the limitations imposed by circumstances of birth or inherited cultural conditioning. This perspective radically transforms our relationship not only with Jesus but with all humanity, revealing that we are all brothers and sisters on the same journey of conscious return to our original divine home. The Christic seed that Jesus planted in the collective consciousness of humanity continues to germinate in every heart that opens to love, multiplying infinitely through every act of kindness, every word of wisdom, and every gesture of genuine compassion that we manifest in our daily lives as conscious expressions of the universal lineage of the eternal Christ. If we consciously accept that Jesus never truly belonged to the genealogical lineage of David, we are courageously breaking with one of the oldest and most deeply rooted foundational pillars of traditional Christian theology, a paradigm shift that has revolutionary implications for our entire understanding of the divine nature and Christ's mission. This acceptance represents much more than a simple historical or academic correction. It constitutes a radical transformation in our perception of how true spiritual authority functions and manifests itself in the world. It means abandoning the need for external validation through documents, traditions, or institutional approval, and discovering that Jesus' real authority emanated directly from his pure and uninterrupted connection with the universal divine source. This revelation fundamentally challenges the traditional hierarchical structure that places religious authority in genealogies, apostolic successions, or ecclesiastical approvals, suggesting that true spiritual authority is always direct, personal, and based on the purity of the channel for divine energy. When we understand this deeply, our own relationship with the divine becomes more direct, intimate, and authentic, free from the unnecessary mediations that often obscure our natural connection with the source of all life. This revolutionary signifies that Jesus' transformative authority did not come from noble blood, ancestral tradition, or human approval, but directly from the divine spirit that fully inhabited his being and expressed itself through every word, action, and presence he manifested in the world. This understanding frees Jesus from all earthly limitations and restores him to his true dimension as a direct manifestation of universal cosmic consciousness, operating according to spiritual laws that completely transcend all social, religious, and cultural conventions of any time or place. His authority was self-evident to all who had spiritual eyes to see, emanating naturally from his ability to manifest unconditional love, infinite wisdom, and transformative power that touched and awakened the divine latent in every sincere soul. This spiritual authority needed no external validation because it continually validated itself through the fruits it produced: transformed hearts, renewed lives, restored hope, and re-established divine connection. Jesus' true authority continues to operate today through the same spiritual dynamic, touching and transforming lives regardless of any genealogical considerations or traditional institutional approval. Edgar Cayce brilliantly demonstrates that this genealogical revelation restores Christ to his original and authentic dimension, not as heir to a limited and temporal earthly throne, but as the eternal bearer of universal divine consciousness, who came to plant seeds of spiritual transformation that would continue to grow throughout all future times. This perspective elevates Jesus far beyond any particular historical category, revealing him as a cosmic force of love and wisdom, operating simultaneously in multiple dimensions of reality to support the conscious evolution of all life in the universe. When Jesus is freed from earthly genealogical limitations, his universality and accessibility become infinitely greater, allowing people of all cultures, eras, and spiritual backgrounds to connect directly with his transformative essence. This cosmic dimension of Jesus does not diminish his humanity, but elevates it and perfumes it with a divine fragrance, demonstrating the extraordinary potential latent in every human being who consciously chooses to collaborate with the divine plan of elevating planetary consciousness through active love and selfless service. This fundamental shift in the genealogical paradigm magnificently frees us from the compulsive need to seek external proof, historical documents, or institutional validation, and lovingly invites us to see Jesus as he truly was and continues to be, an extraordinary spiritual being who came to demonstrate and teach the path back to our true divine nature. This liberation from genealogical limitations allows our connection with Jesus to become more direct, personal, and transformative, based not on beliefs about ancient lineages, but on the living, present experience of his light operating through our own awakened consciousness. When we stop seeking Jesus in the scrolls of the past and begin seeking him in the present transformation of our hearts, we discover that he is far closer and more accessible than we ever imagined. This closeness is not sentimental or imaginary, but real and practical, manifesting itself through spiritual insights, inner guidance, character transformation, and a growing capacity to love all living beings unconditionally. Jesus' true lineage then manifests through our own conscious spiritual evolution, making us living extensions of his original mission to awaken humanity to its true divine identity. If this message touches your heart and inspires new insights into your life, know that every video we create here is made with great care and dedication. Our purpose is to spread spiritual knowledge, help more people awaken to their true essence, and strengthen this community of truth seekers. If this content made a difference to you, imagine how many souls can be enlightened with this same message. Here on YouTube, there is a simple and special way to support us. Through the button, "Thanks a lot," This is a way to show that this content has had a real impact on your life and to help us continue producing quality materials, bringing knowledge and inspiration to those who need it most. Every contribution, no matter how small, is a gesture of gratitude and love, and makes all the difference so we can move forward with this mission. But, regardless of anything, the most important thing is your presence here. Your engagement, comments, and support are the energy that keeps this community alive and growing. If you can contribute, we'll receive it with open hearts and immense gratitude. If you can't, your positive vibes and participation are already a great gift. Together, we are spreading more light, more love, and more knowledge to the world. Thank you so much for being part of this journey. May your journey be filled with evolution, learning, and connection with the divine. The final and most profound impact of this revolutionary revelation is that it connects us directly with the universal and eternal essence of the Christ, freeing us from all the doctrinal, cultural, and historical limitations that often obscure our ability to receive and manifest the Christ light in our own daily lives. When we understand that Jesus represents a cosmic consciousness accessible to all, our spirituality becomes more authentic, practical, and transformative, focused not on venerating a distant historical figure, but on developing and expressing the same divine qualities he perfectly demonstrated. This understanding transforms our spiritual practice from passive worship to active collaboration, from external dependence to inner empowerment, from imaginary separation to conscious union with the Christ force that continually operates through all hearts, sincerely open to serve the greater good of all life. Cayce's revelation of the lineage of Jesus therefore invites us to become a conscious part of the true universal Christ family, united not by blood or tradition, but by the conscious choice to manifest love, wisdom, and service as natural expressions of our true, awakened divine nature. Now you deeply understand why insisting on David's genealogical lineage actually limits and diminishes the true cosmic greatness of Jesus Christ, keeping him imprisoned in human categories inadequate for his universal dimension. He never needed to prove earthly descent to validate his divine authority, because his true origin was infinitely higher, cosmic, eternal, and completely spiritual, transcending all imaginable genealogical limitations. This extraordinary revelation changes absolutely everything in our understanding. It dismantles limiting traditions, shatters restrictive dogmas, and brings us tremendously closer to the real and universal essence of the eternal Christ. When we free Jesus from earthly genealogical bonds, we discover his true dimension as a cosmic transformative force that continues to operate through all hearts, sincerely open to receive his divine light. The true lineage of Jesus is all of us who consciously choose to awaken to the same awareness of unconditional love, practical wisdom, and selfless service that he perfectly demonstrated during his transformative earthly mission. This universal spiritual lineage continually grows through every act of kindness, every word of wisdom, and every gesture of compassion that we manifest as natural expressions of our true, awakened divine nature. Understanding this truth frees us for a much more intimate, direct, and transformative relationship with the eternal Christ, based not on ancient documents or human traditions, but on the living, present experience of his energy operating through our own consciously evolving consciousness. This is the true heritage Jesus left us, not a blood genealogy, but a lineage of light that connects all sincere seekers of divine truth into a universal cosmic family of love and service.